Okay, thank you. Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to this press conference organized by the EPN Biomass Action Network and its Canadian member Stand Earth. The Biomass Action Network is a network of more than 220 NGOs and rights holder groups that have signed on to a biomass delusion statements and which are joining in campaigns against large-scale industrial wood-based bioenergy. Because we see this as a false solution to climate change. And as you may have heard already, a lot of movements, activist movements, have called this Conference of the Parties the False Solutions COP. Maybe we should even call it the Fake Solutions COP, because we've already seen in the first days how fake news also dominates this COP. For example, this Monday, in a quite unusual move, there was a decision adopted on carbon markets, which has been promoted by the COP presidency as an adoption of carbon markets. But legally it wasn't. It was just a decision to take note of the work of a supervisory body and of standards that have been elaborated by the supervisory body with the request to further elaborate them. So those standards weren't adopted yet we've seen Twitter messages, X messages, and other news going around that this is already adopted. My colleague Shaporna will talk more about how devastating this kind of moves are for the world. But it just shows how much fake solutions, false solutions, are really dominating this Conference of the Parties. And we will actually organize an action about this with a lot of different movements tomorrow at 1:30 at the entrance of Area B, if you're interested for a photo opportunity. And bioenergy, as we will try to explain here, is one of the very biggest false solutions. It's actually, in the European Union, where I come from originally, it's originally some 2/3 of all renewable energy is actually bioenergy over the past years. And this is very bad for the climate, as will be explained here, because it actually causes even more emissions than coal. It is very bad for biodiversity, has been recognized frequently also by the Convention on Biodiversity, both for forest and for other ecosystems. And it's very, very bad for all those people that depend on those ecosystems, on those lands, indigenous peoples, women, and local communities. So we have a couple of great speakers from all over the world that will highlight why this is such a false solution and why this is so problematic, that all over this Conference of the Parties there's still a promotion of bioenergy as a so-called solution to climate change. So the first speaker here is Tegan Hansen. She is the senior forest campaigner of Stand Earth in Canada. And she will elaborate more on the question why we really feel that bioenergy should be excluded from nationally determined commitments.
Thank you, Simone. So here in the first few days of COP29, we're seeing countries begin to announce new NDCs. And we're all watching to see if these NDCs do their job and collectively pave the way to keep us below 1.5 while ensuring climate justice. We want these NDCs to be ambitious. At the very least, we expect them to be based in reality. But concerningly, what we're seeing is countries doubling down on support for bioenergy. We know that industrial-scale bioenergy destroys forests and violates human rights while emitting as much or more carbon dioxide than coal per unit of energy generated. And we know that countries have these facts because we have put them in front of leaders year after year after year. But supporting bioenergy can seem like an easy way for countries on paper to reduce their emissions while repurposing existing fossil fuel infrastructure, including renovating coal plants or co-firing biomass with coal. Reducing emissions on paper means nothing to the climate. And already, biomass globally accounts for more than 50% of renewable energy. Unless countries change course, we are risking locking ourselves into a highly polluting future that will far exceed this 1.5 degree threshold that these NDCs are supposed to be avoiding. My own country of Canada is a really important example. Canada is the third largest exporter of wood pellets for biomass energy globally, behind Vietnam and the United States. And Canada very famously does not properly account for logging emissions. The forests where I live in British Columbia are among the most carbon-rich forests on the planet, thanks to millennia of management by Indigenous nations. These are the places that we keep hearing are integral to averting the worst case scenario for the climate emergency. We need to keep these forests standing. We know that when they're logged, and they are continuously logged day after day, these forests will not recover the carbon that they currently store. Now they are being increasingly logged for so-called renewable energy, for biomass energy. I have sat beside pellet plants in British Columbia and watched logging truck after logging truck after logging truck unload at these plants, while our governments deny the fact that they are using logs from these forests. Canada not only supports this sector, but it subsidizes it. And our governments have obscured the truth and denied reports of logging in old-growth forests to supply these plants. Canada also tells us that it wants to combine nature and climate in its NDC, but it cannot do this in a meaningful way while it continues to prop up and support the biomass sector. We expect rich countries like Canada to pay a fair share for the just transition and not undermine our global ability to reduce emissions.
Thank you. As already mentioned, one of the big problems is that biomass actually emit more CO2 than even coal. But sadly, it's also still being promoted as an option to co-fire with coal. And Amaya Octaviani, who's the Bioenergy campaign manager of Trend Asia, will explain why that is very problematic.
Okay, thank you, Simone. Hello, everyone. Yeah, like Simone, I believe that COP29 very likely to be a facet to hide false solution, because as developed countries are expected to pass out coal by 2030, it leads to countries like Japan, South Korea, Finland, Netherlands, and even China are turning to biomass as a substitute in their coal-fired power plant. Yeah, but this is false solution. Indonesia, my country, has embraced the carbon neutral claim from biomass energy, integrating it into coal-fired power plant through co-firing. This initiative has been rolled out across 52 coal-fired power plants in Indonesia. But we must know what are the real costs of using biomass alongside of coal in coal-fired power plant. First, it will prolong the operational lifespan of coal and the power plant itself. And the harm inflicted by coal mining continues to persist. In Indonesia, tragic incident occur where children lose their life in abandoned mine pit without reclamation. And also communities situated near coal-fired power plants where particulate matter 2.5 is released from coal combustion experience notably higher mortality rates due to this exposure. And co-firing biomass in coal power plant in Indonesia serves merely as a guise for a destruction of tropical rainforests to establish monoculture energy crops. Because since 2020 until now, there is not a single coal power plant in Indonesia has utilized wood pellet. But the need to comply the demand of biomass, specifically wood pellets, brings a range of significant concerns. The demand for wood pellet for domestic 10.2 million tons is threatening the loss of at least 1 million hectares of tropical rainforests in Indonesia. And among companies involved in biomass production, several have engaged in deforestation, displaced indigenous communities, turned from independent farmers into laborers, and even criminalized local farming groups. It poses significant concern regarding human rights violation. An additional issue is arising regarding the conflict between food and energy. Land that was once used by local farming to produce food is now being converted into energy plantation by corporation. So food security in Indonesia is under threat, and food estate program is not going to fix that. Also significant demand from biomass heavy country like South Korea and also Japan, as from other corporations to enter this sector. There is already 6 new permits for energy plantation have been issued to major players like Indica Energy and Mitra Bara di Perdana, who previously focused on coal with the aim of exporting wood pellet. One company that has exported to South Korea and Japan is responsible for deforestation of thousands of hectares in one province in Indonesia. The investor identified are also from Japan. This situation is quite paradoxical because Indonesia is being urged to protect its tropical rainforests, which serve as a vital natural carbon sink. However, developed countries are looking to Indonesian forests to fulfill their biomass requirement for co-firing or even full firing in their power plant. This situation contributes to a larger issue of colonialism in forested regions of global south countries, such as Indonesia. As developed countries in the global north seek to pass out coal, often at the expense of local ecosystem and communities in Indonesia. We need to stop viewing biomass, particularly from wood, as a carbon neutral and renewable energy source. The practice of co-firing shouldn't be viewed as a legitimate strategy to passing out coal. Developed countries must cease investing in misleading solutions because these countries already have significant emission debt to address. It is crucial to prioritize genuine solutions and stop depending on false solutions that worsening the climate crisis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now continue to address one of the big underlying causes why bioenergy keeps on being expanded, which are actually the massive subsidies and other forms of incentives, including tax incentives that are given to the bioenergy industry. And a very notable example there is the United Kingdom. So I'm very happy to give the word to Rory Brogan, who's the Senior Policy Officer on Bioenergy and BECS of the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds in the UK.
Thanks, Simone. Yes, tackling the nature and climate crisis is the foundation of what we do at the RSPB. We must tackle these joint crises together to help reaffirm the global commitment to 1.5 from Paris, the global renewable energy target from GST1, and implement the outcomes of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework in a way that's good for people, planet and nature. I'm delighted to be able to speak today. The RSPB has long-standing concerns about the damage bioenergy is doing to climate and nature and people. COP29 is all about climate finance. I want to highlight that the problem is not a lack of finance, but political will. Every year, trillions in public finance is spent on subsidies and tax breaks that fuel the climate and biodiversity crises. The money must flow to the help, not the harm. And this means ensuring any climate finance goal excludes subsidies for harmful practices and false solutions like bioenergy and bioenergy with carbon capture and storage. The UK has earned a well-deserved reputation as a global leader on international forests and climate policy, playing a key role in establishing the Glasgow Declaration on Forests and Land Use, which was an agreement on halting and reversing deforestation. And we heard from the Energy Secretary and Net Zero Minister Ed Miliband yesterday on the leadership role the UK is now taking on the Forest and Climate Leaderships Partnership. We also warmly welcome the ambition of the UK's NDC target that was launched yesterday. But every year, the UK's creation of new woodland at no more than 20,000 hectares per year is outstripped several times over by the global logging to meet UK wood pellet demand for bioenergy. Burning wood for bioenergy increases carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, harms rare and important forests around the world, and will increase energy bills for the British public. The reason this happens is due to flawed carbon accounting rules embedded in the UNFCCC process, failing to recognise the significant emissions taking place, which has led to the UK and many other governments giving a disproportionate role to bioenergy in their energy mix, meaning that bioenergy is able to claim low carbon subsidies. Drax Power Station, for example, receives subsidy to burn biomass. These subsidies came to over 500 million in 2023 alone. Substantial financial subsidies are expected to continue until 2027, when current contracts end, bringing the total public subsidy received by Drax between 2012 and 2027 to over £10 billion. The two other major UK bioenergy power stations, Linemouth and MGT Teesside, also receive 1.4 billion and 1.5 billion respectively in between 2020 and 2027. And any eventual bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, BECCS, power plants, if ever built, could need £43 billion in subsidies over their lifetime. Put plainly, bioenergy will keep on increasing people's energy bills in the UK whilst continuing to damage our vital forest ecosystems and undermine climate targets. Decision makers across the world should not lock in future energy systems that are reliant on biomass, a point which was underlined by the UK government's own Climate Change Committee. Instead, they should redirect these billions of pounds towards deploying energy efficiency measures and genuinely low-carbon renewables such as solar and wind in harmony with nature. Wind and solar are significantly cheaper and cleaner than bioenergy, and only then will these provide a cheap and reliable supply. It would be madness to ignore these warnings and continue to subsidise the harmful burning of biomass.
Thank you very much. I think this is one classic example of what you call false climate finance and the wrong way of finance. Another very clear source of finance is already false source of climate finance is carbon markets. And yeah, we very much fear that the hype that is currently being created, the fake story that's currently being created, will channel a lot more funding into this bioenergy disaster from world carbon markets. So I very much invite Shaporna Lohiri, who's the senior biodiversity and climate advisor of the Global Forest Coalition, one of the largest coalitions of rights holders and NGOs of the world, to further elaborate on this.
Thank you, Simone. I think we should, first of all, accept the fact that when we talk of carbon market and trading of carbon credits, the ultimate result is basically the polluting industry or the emitting industry is buying the certificate to pollute more. So that's the very essence of carbon market and carbon trading. So the bioenergy being part of carbon trading is not new. When the Kyoto Protocol, under Kyoto Protocol, the Green Development Mechanism started, it had actually at some point of time quite a lot of projects where bioenergy was put into the block to trade in terms of creating credits to trade within the CDM platform. And these were basically from India, Indonesia, Chile, and Peru. And I remember in 2018 or 19, we suddenly stumbled upon the UNFCCC website on CDM resources, where they were actually offering credits for compensating, coming into the UNFCCC conferences, the emissions that you generate for participating in these conferences, and they were actually selling off the credits from some of the bioenergy CDM projects. And there were three of them, at least I remember, in India, one from Peru, one from Chile, and one from Indonesia. So bioenergy has been already put on the table to be traded under CDM. So what will change basically? Now, if 6.4 is made operational, there are about 7,800 around CDM projects which are, since 2020, looking to get active once this is all operationalized. So they will be again coming back to the a kind of CDM registry. And many of them will be erstwhile bioenergy projects, basically which uses wood pulp, wood chips, or pellets to produce bioenergy. And then the removal part of Article 6.4, which is very clear and which is a double whammy actually. They're saying that removal activity consisting of afforestation with fast-growing species with biomass feedstock feeding into bioenergy with carbon capture and storage. So it's a double whammy. The energy plantations, which will be there for, as a feedstock to bioenergy, can also be claimed under carbon marketing, carbon offsets. And then when it is transformed into bioenergy and carbon capture, where you can show that you are capturing carbon and dumping it into anywhere, offshore, seashore, or into the oil drilling dumps, you are basically removing carbon from the air. So that will be offsetting and generating credits. So at one point of time, a lot of CCDM credits coming in. We'll also have projects involving bioenergy. And in terms of the 6.4 going operational, you have carbon credits being generated by the energy plantations and also the bioenergy and carbon capture projects. This is where the tyranny of, renewable energy comes in. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We still have a couple of minutes, so are there any questions? Is everything very clear?
If no one else has a question, I don't think I need to speak to microphone. Who is Canada exporting these wood pellets to in particular?
So Canada exports mainly to the UK and Japan, and also the EU and South Korea. So we've seen in recent years a bit of a shift to exporting more to Japan, and actually I'm glad that Drax came up. Drax now has a near monopoly on wood pellet production in British Columbia, where I'm from, and is mainly exporting to Japan, as well as other markets in the UK, the EU, and South Korea. So actually this biomass plant is now effectively a logging company.
May I ask a supplementary? Are you aware that Drax was expelled?
Can you speak in the microphone, please, because...
Oh, I see. It links, does it? Okay. Are you aware that Drax Corporation was expelled from the Dow S&P Clean Energy Index in New York in 2021 because its products were not regarded as clean energy? Their emissions were too high. That was an investor decision, not an environmentalist decision.
I mean, I think what we want to see is countries like Canada also reflect that this industry is not a renewable one. We're still seeing, we've talked about subsidies from the UK for Drax. We've seen subsidies from Canada for Drax. And so we need to see the clear and explicit recognition that this is not, this highly polluting industry which destroys forests and threatens communities is not renewable. And we need countries to reflect that in their plans.
Do you want to add something to that? Or?
Yeah, well, just to say, I suppose it all boils down to the accounting rules that we have here from this very place, the UNFCCC land use accounting framework, that means we are at an impasse when it comes to acknowledging these false solutions. And so we really need to urge all decision makers here to revisit those accounting rules and to integrate better frameworks that highlight ecosystem integrity, that highlight true climate targets in national determined contributions.
No, I think, are there any other further questions? Then I think we should wind up. I just want to conclude. I think it's very obvious, I mean, that if so-called forest and climate leaders here can be the host country to just one company, which just causes so much disaster all over the world, which, as far as I've learned, already has had some 11,000 environmental violations in the past years alone. I mean, and this is causing massive forest degradation, massive deforestation. Just this month, another paper came out in the European Union, a scientific paper recognizing that there's been an abrupt decline in forest quality and forest area, in forest carbon stock in the European Union, because of this whole shift to what they call now the bioeconomy, which is also this whole illusion that building with wood, that using wood for paper instead of plastics, that these are all good alternatives. But in the meantime, the forests we have are rapidly declining because there's simply too much demand for wood. And of all this, using it to simply burn it is by far the worst option you can get. And that is sort of recognized in the European Union, but sadly, I mean, it's not being applied in practice as we see far too often. And just the whole fact that these fraudulent LULUCF rules do not fully take into account all this degradation that is happening, and that the whole energy sector in the meantime is so dominated by corporations, including forestry corporations, that are pushing this whole model just because it's a commercially very attractive model, because of course I have understood some £2 million of subsidy per day is a very economically attractive model for any company. So here we see once again, and just to conclude with that you know, this whole climate change process has become so corporate dominated. And we also see it here at the Conference of the Parties, where these bioenergy companies, where the big monoculture tree plantations companies, where all the companies that benefit from these very false solutions are still getting such a big say throughout, in the corridors, throughout the whole conference building, but also in the delegations. And we're already worried in this light, looking ahead for next year's Conference of the Parties, because if there's one country where the plantations industry, the biomass industry has always played a very dominant role in its foreign policy, it's Brazil. And we're very worried that COP30 might become the chop COP. They're pretending also to be a forest and climate leader. In reality, what will be promoted are massive monoculture tree plantations. Brazil is one of the countries with the largest area of monoculture tree plantations on the world. And this is promoted under a bioeconomy heading, you know, bioenergy. But let me conclude with one thing. Bio doesn't mean good in this case. It's not even organic. These monoculture tree plantations are suffering from massive use of agrochemicals, very dangerous agrochemicals like glyphosate, that are causing blindness, that are causing all kinds of reproductive problems with women. So this is not even organic, it's not bio, it's not good for the planet. So we very much hope that countries will take the step to phase out bioenergy from their national determined commitments. And I'm very happy to say that one of the very few positive things that's happening in my own country, the Netherlands, is that they have decided to phase out subsidies, at least for bioenergy production for the electricity sector. They've also just recently decided in my hometown, Amsterdam, to not build a new biomass plant because they realized the population was radically against it. So that means that, you know, struggling and fighting, we can halt this industry. Thank you very much for attending this, and please, if you do have further questions, we will be available for interviews. And please leave your card so we can also connect you to other experts on this field. Thank you, and have a good evening.